pull you in a bit tighter. Alright, the advanced shaft's in place, that's all good. I should find a tripod socket for the base of the camera in a second. At first we'll do the rewind shaft. So a bit of synthetic grease. Put it on the inner of the shaft. A little bit in that slot too, that's where the screw runs. This goes in from the top. Line up the slot with the screw hole. Find the appropriate special shaped screw that goes in there. Run that into place. Now I'll put the rewind knob on there temporarily. I want to check the action of that, make sure it is smooth. It is. Here we have the guide bush for the rewind shaft. Again, with synthetic grease, I'll just lubricate the inside of that. Pop it on the shaft, check that it runs smoothly. This can go into the body. It's held in place with 3 screws. Get them all started. Tighten them up. Pop the rewind knob back on. Now there should be more resistance to pulling the entire shaft out of the cassette than there should be in lifting the knob. You pull it into this position to rewind the film, pull it into this position to take the cassette out. So that first movement should be easier. Need to assemble our film advance components here. And where to start? Oh, here. There are 2 springs that look much the same as each other. I'll put them here side by side so you can see. I'll zoom you in. This one goes at the front of the camera. This one goes at the rear of the camera. Both springs are held in with shoulder screws that they wrap around. They're the same screws in both cases, or the same shape and size. Here we have the ratchet gear, which prevents you rewinding the film unless you've selected rewind. That sits on the top, making sure that spring's not trapped underneath it. Then we have our levers. The levers that control the action. Let's put the gear in place first. Have a gear here. Let's put some synthetic grease in the centre of that. That's the screw that it runs on, and it runs right here. Couples to the sprocket. The sprocket drives this wheel. If I can get the screw to start. That's better. They're coupled together, and I'm just checking the action of that. It feels okay. That's fine, that's good. I'll just tighten that screw up. Now that gear we've just put in place has a cam on it, and I'm just putting a bit of molybdenum paste on that cam surface so that the cam that runs over it runs smoothly to the control gear. There's a plain washer goes there. This lever controls your rewind or lack thereof. These levers I'm just lubricating lightly with a bit of molybdenum on the inside edge as I go. And a washer there, spacer. This piece goes in here. This piece goes in here. And then we have the shaft that holds it all together, which we need to get through 3 levers and 2 washers, line up with the hole, fail to get things correctly seated on their shoulders. That's good, they're all moving correctly. That spring can hook through under that arm and goes behind it. That's it. So now you have the ratchet action, or you will do once that's all tightened down. At the front here, this spring has to go underneath this lever here. It's always entertaining to try and get that in position. It wants to go any way but the way you want it to go. Where's the correct screwdriver for poking at that? It's hiding. There it is. Okay. So that spring needs to go under that arm and behind the stud on the bottom of that arm. And it wants to do anything but do that. That's it, it's in place. Why is this not wanting to close? What's happening here? It's catching on the body. That's alright. It's like distortion of the door there. The shutter release. The shutter release is here. Put a smear of molybdenum in the centre where it runs on the guide, and I'll put some on the outside. Particularly here, that's where it runs up against the mechanism, and we don't. This was unusually stiff. You don't want it to be unusually stiff. Now that spacer that I mentioned, that needs to go on the shaft. So, to get that on the shaft is a bit of an act. Usually how I do it is I make sure I've got some of that molybdenum paste on the end of that shaft and use that to glue that spacer in place. Make sure it's neatly centered. And then we have to get this down through the body without knocking that thing off. And over the shaft. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing, but it's an awkward job. Now the shutter release sits on the body like that. It's moving smoothly. Bit of touch of grease on that sloping face there, that's where it works against this arm. Here is our advanced rewind lever. Pop that into place. It's held in place with that bush. And just tighten that down lightly. Make sure I've got that centered correctly. No, it's not centered correctly. That's better. There should be some controlled friction there so that as soon as you start advancing the film at the knob, that it automatically shifts that lever across. So I need to hold the shaft inside here again. That's good. Remembering that this is left hand threaded. Do that up. That's good. It seems to be working correctly. We put the advanced knob on there. I'm rolling the sprocket with my thumb on the inside to advance the gear here, which then brings the lock into play, which locks the film advance and frees up the shutter release to allow you to take a shot. That's good. I think it's probably worth stopping right now and getting that tripod socket on the base of the camera before I go any further. I better go and find one. Alright, tripod socket, we have it. So, that spring drops in, this plate drops in, and then we have the tripod socket with 3 screws, 2 of the originals and 1 to replace the broken screw. Once they're all in place, I'll check that the leather's a good fit on there. This didn't come from this model, it came from a later model. That looks good. And the leather needs to be glued down in place. So I'll apply adhesive to the leather. Make sure I've got this well spread, and evenly spread. And to achieve that, I use a toothpick. The leather's a bit distorted at the top end here, because that tripod socket had twisted up and out of place. That looks good. Now I'll push it in around the tripod bush there, because leather, like leatherette, over time it dries out and it shrinks, and it doesn't want to go around an object like that. It needs to be pushed down into place. That looks very good actually. So that's the leather in place. The film advance mechanism and stuff is all in place. The shutter could go in here now. No, I want to find a screw for the back of that shutter. We won't do that. That action seems smooth enough. The rangefinder could go on the camera now. And before I do, let's put the frame counter in place first. Put a little bit of synthetic lubricant in there. This is where you adjust the frame counter, or setting it. Alright, now we need to get the screw into the pivot. About there, I think. And get that screw started. Yes. Pull that bracket back. It's a bit bent. Do up that screw. That arm should pivot freely, and it does. It has a spring. It needs to go in position. Get that down over the post and hook it back over that stop screw. That's it. That's correct. Rangefinder. Here's the rangefinder. I'm going to put a tiny bit of lacquer on that plate so that once it's screwed down in position it won't ever shake loose. Rangefinders frequently are knocked out of alignment because the camera receives a drop, a thump, and as a result it shifts on the screws because there's no dowel holding it in place, it's only held down with screws. There's a little bit of play there, it'll shift, then you've lost your adjustment. I don't want that, so let's get a couple of spots of lacquer. We'll glue this thing down here once those screws are in and the lacquer hardens up. It's going nowhere. but it's not strong enough to stop you being able to dismantle the camera at a later date. We can get these screws to drop down the holes correctly. We'll be in business. Alright, now making sure that the rangefinder is square with the body. Do those two screws up. Then I'll check out the window and see what its action looks like. Well, the vertical alignment's good, the horizontal alignment's out. It comes to infinity a little bit too quick. So I need to make my adjustments here. This is the adjustment I'm making, this is the lock for the adjustment. So loosen off the lock. And see how we go. I think that screw is over centre, is it? Yes, it was. Once I'm happy that the infinity position is correct, I've got to check the action of the rangefinder at a close focus distance to make sure that that's also correct. We're very close now. This process usually involves a fair bit of toing and froing, trying to get the adjustment just right, so that as you move the focus scale ring to infinity, to the infinity position, that the images in the finder coincide just as you reach that point, not before you reach that point. And it can be quite a subtle difference. And that, I think, is it. So I'll tighten the lock screw and then check that it didn't shift as I did that. No, that all appears to be good. So the rangefinder is good. Everything at the top of the camera is just about ready to go. We can put the top cover on now. I'll zoom you back out. So, I have the frame counter and its little spring. It sits on the shaft here. I can get that to cooperate. That's better. And the top cover, to fit the top cover. Okay, so what we have to do is wind the sprocket until we've reached the cocked position. You have to hold it in that position. I have to hook my advanced rewind lever through the slot at the back, get the wheel in place for the counter adjuster, and get this over the top of the shutter release shaft all at the same time. And it's only a little bit impossible. There we go. That all looks good. Check that that frame counter is seated correctly and engaged. It doesn't appear to be. That's better. Okay, so everything appears to be working there. I'll stick the Film Advance knob on. I'm not seeing any action from the frame counter. It's not working correctly. Oh, it's counting some random number of frames. Interesting. I'll have to find out what's going on. Check that I've got that correctly assembled. I cock the shutter again, hold down the shutter release, lift the top back off and over. Let's look at this. The gear here on that shaft engages with the counter here on that wheel, and that wheel is freewheeling. It's not firm on that shaft. So I think we need a little bit more tension on those arms. In other words, we had too much friction in one part and not enough friction in another. That might do it. Now, why was there too much friction on the other part? I'm just checking the inside of the case to make sure that's not rough. A little smear of grease there, just in case it was. Right, let's have another go. No, it's not quite right. It's hard to get that advance and rewind lever through the slot. Something's not happening. That's it. Frame count is now working correctly. Spin on that knob. Put the screws in the top housing, each end. Right, tighten the advance knob in place. That's done. Put the tip on the shutter release. Just tighten that very lightly. Collar over the rewind. Put the rewind knob in place. Tighten that up. Close the back of the camera. There we have it. The body of the camera is finished. I want to find a little screw to go in here to position that shutter so that it will not rotate in the mount. And once that's done, that can go straight into the camera, and assuming everything works as I expect, the job will be done. That's enough for today. It's Friday afternoon, it's time for a beer. Alright, when you last saw this, I think the shutter was not in the body. The body had been dealt with. The shutter was not in the body, and I went and found a screw to go in the back of the shutter here that holds the shutter in alignment in the body. That was all successful. The shutter was fitted. Focus was checked and adjusted as needed. In this case I needed to remove the paper shim to get correct adjustment at the infinity position. and the action of the shutter and everything works well. Rangefinder's adjusted. Everything appears to be quite good. So at this stage I'm just in the closing process here now. And I'm just going to clean up the leather a little. So I'll take a little bit of naphtha, just wipe over that leather to remove any surface grease or dirt. Don't need to be too fussy about that. There's not an awful lot coming away there. You can see that paper's pretty clean. And then I've got my Wapro renovating polish, which is very, very thick, very creamy, very heavy with the pigments. And I'm just going to rub a little of this on the leather. Especially on the camera back where those big ice bumps were. Of course the surface had rubbed off the leather at that point. And so the colour of the leather had gone at that point. That's probably sufficient for the moment. I'll give that 5 minutes or so to soak in a little bit, and then I'll buff it off. Alright, let's buff up this leather a bit. Make sure I take off any excess that had run over onto the metal edges. The discoloration you see on the body edges in this picture will be down to surface corrosion. At some stage or other it means the camera was left in a leather case and it was damp. Typically it means that the owner was caught out in the rain with their camera and simply just packed it away. If you do get caught out in the rain with your camera, remove the camera from the case, open the camera up and the case and leave them until they're thoroughly dry before you put the camera back in the case. Alright, so that's it as far as this camera goes. It's quite a nice example of the Retina II 014. In this case it has the Retina halogen lens, the rodent stock lens, and now it's all happily working again. One of the main features with the problems it had when it came to me, the most notable problem I think probably was that the focus was free enough but it was very dry feeling. That's nice and smooth now. The rangefinder works correctly. It was stuck out in the forward position. Dried grease and a bit of corrosion up there was the cause for that. And the other feature with this was that the shutter release button didn't pop back up. Now that's all working correctly, of course. So you may remember there was some obvious dirt and corrosion here. Well, I've cleaned away what I can. There's still some marks there from that surface corrosion, and short of painting it with silver paint or replacing the whole struts mechanism, that's going to remain there. It's not causing any problem, and I don't see a need to replace those parts. So there we have it, Retina II stripped down in service. Thanks for watching.